Hello and welcome to the second episode of the Very Gary podcast. This episode of the podcast, I take a trip over to the Cobequid Wildlife Rehabilitation Centre and I talk to my friend Murdo Messer. It was a pretty good tour through. Went through the nursery down to the Big Geesley. I'm going to let him explain what the Big Geesley is. I'm not going to try to stumble my way through a description of it. But it was very impressive. They're doing a great job, and this was really eye-opening. There's a problem with lead poisoning these days. There has been for a long time, but it's a really bad problem, and a lot of these birds that are in there are suffering from lead poisoning. So I'm just gonna give him a mic, basically, is what I thought when I went in there, and I'm just gonna let him rip on it, and that's exactly what he did. He said a lot of things that make sense, and I hope everybody can take a little bit away from this one. So enjoy, and here we go.
Come on, baby, drive me wild, falling quickly, paralyzing, I know it won't let go.
Tell everybody where we're at.
Well, we're standing in our large raptor recovery building, or as we like to call it, the Big Geesley. So basically, it's the building where the birds of prey that we rehabilitate come to learn to fly again, or to restore their muscle strength so that they can be released, basically.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So how long have you been doing this for?
We've been doing this since 2001, so going on 16 years now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Gee. How many people are involved with this?
With the organization, we have about 3 or 4 core people and about 5 or 6 volunteers, and it comes and goes. It varies, but that's about it. Probably about 10 people in total.
Oh, that's
who
cool.
work for the organization. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, we're here. There's birds on the other side of the enclosure right now.
Yeah.
So if you see me whipping my head around, that's what I'm doing. I'm watching out.
Well, at this point, you'll cut to a picture of the birds on the other side of the building.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So this is we're standing in the flyway, which is literally the last stop before the birds get released. So in here, because it's a continuous flyway, it's basically an extended octagon or an oval. The birds can do laps in here. It's sort of like a racetrack. But because most wild animals are scared of people, as soon as they hear us coming down the driveway to the building, they all go to the other side to stay as far away from us as possible. But when we're not here, they would be on the perches above our head here, or in the background, or on the perch over there. So they would distribute themselves, but as soon as they hear people, they all go together in the backside.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because you said that they're not really fans of people, right?
They don't like people at all, no.
Jeez.
No.
Has anybody ever been nipped by one?
No, not in here, no. Like, sometimes I might get nipped while I'm holding on to them, but that's because I'm holding on to them, right? And I do wear as much protective gear as possible, but sometimes they'll find a gap and get a little pinch from a beak or something like that.
Yeah, right.
But we're usually very careful about handling them so that doesn't happen. But in here, no, they just stay as far away as possible.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, they really don't like people at all.
Yeah, and we just came up from that building up there is called the nursing.
The nursery, we call it the
The
nursery.
nursery?
Yeah,
Okay.
so it's kind of our triage and critical care building. So initially, when an animal arrives at the center, we'll take it into that building and we'll assess the injuries and what needs to be done to it, or if anything can be done for it. And from there we'll move on through its care.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, that's good. I hear. I went through your website, the center's website last night, and there's a big theme with lead poisoning.
That's right.
Going on.
Yeah, so the website is www.cwrc.net for those of you who would like to take a look. And lead poisoning is probably one of the biggest issues that we see facing bald eagles. We see eagles primarily for 3 reasons: 1, lead poisoning; 2, collision with some sort of object; and 3, electrocution. Those are the top 3 reasons they come to our center. Lead poisoning there is something that can be done about it. Collision with things is not much can be done with that, except to try and minimize objects that they're likely to collide with, or be aware that if you're driving along the side of the road and you see an eagle on a carcass at the side of the road, to slow down, because when an eagle gets startled, it's very slow to take off, and usually within the first 2 flaps of it taking off will be right in the path of whatever vehicle's on the highway.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so if you see something on the side of the road, just slow down and give it time to get away, pretty much. Or if you see dead stuff on the side of the road and you're comfortable doing so and it's safe to do so, drag it into the ditch so that that's not so close to the edge of the road, because a lot of birds we see that are injured by cars are injured because they're at the side of the road eating something that was killed on the road.
Oh, right? Yeah.
So, it's kind of important to just keep an eye out for them. And the third reason, electrocution, there's not much we can do about that, because birds like to perch on the highest thing around, and usually the highest things around are power lines. And eagles are big enough that if they stretch out their wings, they can touch two power lines with their wingspan, or they might stand on an ice insulator and touch the ground, like touch a ground wire or touch something else, and they'll short themselves out.
Yeah.
But with lead poisoning, which is an issue that we've been working very hard to educate people about, because there's not a lot of awareness about it. When we first started, we didn't realized that people weren't aware of it, because we would see these eagles come in with lead poisoning, and we knew they had lead poisoning because we would test their blood. We'd take blood and send it away to be tested for a variety of things, and it would give us an idea of the lead level. And over a certain threshold, it's fatal to birds. And somewhere in between, it's actually treatable, and you can actually remove it from their bloodstream and their bones and make them better again. But we would see these eagles coming in, and we're going, well, why aren't people doing anything about it? And we realized that it's because generally people don't know. So we decided, okay, let's just tell them. And if we tell them, maybe they'll stop doing what it is that's causing the problem.
Right.
So the problem is it's lead left over in the environment from hunting and from fishing. So let's say you're out hunting a deer in hunting season, and you shoot it with a lead bullet. The lead bullet, when it hits an animal, will shatter into many, many small fragments.
Okay.
Now, most hunters know this, and they'll cut out the part that's hit with the bullet and the gut pile and stuff like that, and they'll leave it in the field. So the meat they take home generally doesn't have lead in it. Some of it does, because the particles can travel up to 18 inches from the wound track, which is quite a considerable distance.
Oh, wow.
And the pieces can be very small. They'll show up on X-ray, and we have X-rays on our website that you can see.
Yep.
So people could actually be ingesting lead themselves without ever realizing it, because the pieces are so small that they don't notice them when they're swallowing them. But when they leave the wound track and the gut piles in the field, generally they think they're doing good because they're leaving material behind for scavengers, right?
Yeah, right.
So they're helping feed the wild animals. And that would be great if there wasn't lead in it. So what happens is, as soon as eagles hear a gunshot in the woods, they know that something's being shot or dead. So they'll look for a gut pile or a carcass. They'll sometimes circle, right?
Just because you're so used to it.
They're so used to it, yeah, especially the older ones. And they'll go to the gut pile, and if there's any lead in that, they'll ingest that. And the amount it takes to kill a bald eagle is about the size of a tip of a pencil.
Oh,
so if you imagine a pencil tip, that's the amount of lead that would kill a bald eagle. And so a lead bullet can have enough lead in it to kill 10 bald eagles quite easily.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So once we started going to hunting organizations and fishing organizations and saying, this is what we're seeing at our center. These birds are coming in with lead poisoning. We're testing it. It's being shown through radioisotope tracking that the lead is coming from bullets. So it correlates with hunting season. We'll see a spike in hunting season, right just after hunting season. So the alternative is to use non-lead ammunition, and that would be solid copper or some other type of alloy. Now, we've been in touch with a hunter out in California who's worked very hard to try and raise awareness as well. He has a website called the Non-Lead Hunter, and he's put out a DVD about it as well. And because he's a hunter, he knows ballistics, and he knows what it's like to shoot an animal with lead, and he knows what it's like to shoot an animal with non-lead.
Yep.
And in his experience, the non-lead ammunition is far superior to killing the animal, a quicker, cleaner, healthier death than lead. So lead, because it fragments, it disperses the energy throughout the body in small little pieces. The animal will stagger a little bit and then die, or it might bleed to death depending on where you hit it if you're not a good shot. But with copper, if you're hit it in the right spot where you're aiming for, like usually the neck or something like that, because the energy transfer is almost immediate, because the bullet expands into one big petal. Basically, it petals out like a flower. So it turns into this, from a point to a big petals type shape, right?
Yeah.
And we can show you pictures of this. We got them up in the building. And so the energy goes from the bullet into the body, and it's just like this massive shock wave goes through the body, and the animal just drops exactly where it's standing.
Oh,
so
wow.
It's almost instantaneous death. So the non-lead hunter guys, he's trying to promote that among his organizations, and we're trying to do it here in Nova Scotia and Newfoundland and New Brunswick, around the Maritimes. And we've had great success. The hunters, once they see the information and they understand the connection between the lead bullet and the lead in the eagle, they're pretty upset. And when they also understand that the lead in the bullet and the lead in the meat that they're eating and feeding to their children is also an issue, they're more than willing to switch. So it's an education thing, and we've been working very hard to do that, and I think we've been quite successful. And the other side is through lead fishing tackle. So people will, fish a variety of different species, and they have different materials for doing that. Anything that's used as a lead weight to lower the line, sometimes it gets entangled in the bottom and people cut it off, or it gets lost in the bushes, or a fish takes it and is gone with it.
Yeah, that's right.
If a loon or some other aquatic bird ingests that lead, they will get lead poisoning as well, because it breaks down in their digestive system and enters their bloodstream. So that's another pathway for lead in the environment. So a non-lead alternative, such as bismuth or some other alloy, works just as fine, and you don't risk lead poisoning something if you lose it.
Yeah, and that's a lot of lead too for the waste for the fishing, because you used to be able to make those at home.
Yes, and lead's an easy metal to work with because it's so soft, but it's also a neurotoxin. So it doesn't just affect wildlife; it affects people, and it's been known as a neurotoxin for a long time. And I think most people just aren't aware with it. I mean, if you're only exposed to it periodically, it's not a big issue. But if you're exposed to it all the time, like say you primarily hunt game with lead ammunition, and you primarily feed that game to your kids.
Yeah, right.
Because kids are really susceptible to lead poisoning. It actually hinders their cognitive growth. So, and it's permanent. It damages their brain. And if if you're not aware of that, then you're blissful to it. But once you know that is what you're eating, then I would, myself, I wouldn't use it. I'd say no. I'd do something else, right? Because you're poisoning yourself, or you're poisoning your kids, or anybody you give that meat to.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So it's that's one of our big education goals, is to tell people about the hazard of lead ammunition and lead fishing tackle, what it does to the environment, and what it does to animals in the environment, and what it does to people. And so far, in our experience, most people are willing to switch once they know the hazard. Yep.
Wow. That's a lot of the preventative measures there that could be taking place.
Yeah. It's a lot of work, but we want to stop seeing eagles come into our center with lead poisoning, because it's a terrible way to die. Basically, it's a neurotoxin, so it affects their brain, it affects their ability to fly, affects their ability to their balance, paralyzes their sometimes their muscles in their throat, so they have difficulty swallowing or eating. It can cause blindness. It can cause seizures. So basically, once an eagle has ingested lead, it will slowly start to get sick and will no longer be able to fly. And once it can't fly, it can't hunt. And if it can't hunt, it slowly starves to death. So most of the lead poison eagles we see are very emaciated, so they have no muscle mass left. They're close to death. They're starving. They're blind. They're sick. They're staggering. They're disoriented.
Oh, that's terrible.
It's terrible. Terrible way to die. So anything we can do to stop that from happening is what we're working on.
Yeah. Well, geez. Need to do something about it anyway. How many you get a year here?
So far this year, I think we've had somewhere in the neighborhood of 9 or 12 eagles that were in some way impacted by lead poisoning.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
And I asked you before we started recording this, but did you see an increase or a decrease in any of the lead?
Yeah, we saw an increase this year, and we're not sure why. I mean, it could just be that more were found. Like we think it's the tip of the iceberg, because for every one that's found, how many die in the woods that nobody ever sees, right?
Oh, that's right.
Because the ones that are found usually land on somebody's property, or they'll land in front of a car, or they'll be on a trail that somebody is walking along and happens to see it. A lot of times they would be somewhere way in the wilderness and nobody would ever see them die. So we would think that the ones we see are just the tip of the iceberg. So it's definitely an issue that we would love to eradicate from our center, because that would be one less thing for us to deal with, because we're very busy people and we have a lot of animals here.
Certainly,
and a variety of different species and different things that come in. And if we could eliminate lead poisoning, that'd be the number one thing that affects eagles in Nova Scotia, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, that's good. I'm glad you're doing it. I mean, you don't really hear anything about it. This is the first time I really even heard about that lead situation happening. Right. Yeah. Like I always heard it as kids and stuff like that, but I didn't really understand the importance. And this is only one animal too.
Yeah.
Like,
and it's really sneaky too. I mean, like we started talking about lead in terms of, with people who hunt game and with fishing tackle, but it's not just that. It's also people who may want to control rodents on their property, so they're shooting things on their property with a 22 that has lead, and they'll leave it in the field after they shoot it,
Oh,
right? Because
right.
they don't want to deal with it.
Right.
Well, anything that comes along and eats that is going to consume the lead,
Yep.
and that's another source for lead poisoning. Sometimes people who shoot animals, they don't want to butcher them in the field. They'll take them to a butcher shop, and the butcher shop may have a whole pile of stuff that he tosses out the back. It's full of lead, and so if there's anything gets into that, they're going to get lead poisoning as well.
Oh, jeez.
So the simple solution is stop using lead. There's alternatives out there. Why not use them?
Yeah.
Safer for everybody.
Yeah. Go bow.
Yeah.
Go bow
Well,
hunting.
that's a whole other issue.
Oh, is that why? Is there a problem with that?
No. It's just people. It's just it's a different method of hunting. So
Yeah.
right. So I think currently the one that's in this enclosure here is a lead poison eagle. The one that we were up in the nursery with is definitely lead poisoning. We test every large bird of prey that comes in our center for lead, and the majority of them have some level of exposure to it at some point in their bloodstream.
Oh, that's terrible. That means there's so much of it out there.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, it's a huge amount. Yeah.
So, is there anything else that would? Is it just mainly bullets and fishing stuff, like with the
primarily,
lead?
Yeah. So it's the number one source for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wow, that's amazing. We got had a couple pictures of Murdo helping out one of the eagles up in the nursery there, and I'll be sharing that after the video, but we'll get to that.
Or you can cut to it, right?
Yeah, cut to it. Yeah, I'll probably do the cut to the editing, especially with an eagle flying around. That was the same one that did the couple laps,
Yes,
right?
that's right. Yeah.
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 So that's what I was kind of waiting for. That would be a perfect time if one of these cut.
would be good. Yeah, but generally they're pretty. Eagles are generally pretty lazy birds, right? They're opportunistic scavengers. So primarily they won't kill their own food. If there's something dead on the side of the road, they'll go after that first because it's easy, right? Why would you work so hard for your food when it's right there? Except for the ones that fish. Generally they're pretty hardworking. But in here they have a ready supply of food, and generally, they're not going to fly if they don't want to, especially if they know we're in here. They're not going to come around.
They'll just stay over there.
They'll just stay over there until we're gone.
That's
and then you'll have somebody up on that perch up there.
Is it unusual to have many fly together in nature, like in the wild?
They tend to be relatively social. I mean, you see them, if there's a good food supply, they generally get along. I guess they'll have their own pecking order to a certain degree, but places like Sheffield Mills, and there's a place in towards New Glasgow where the farmers throw out the dead things and they congregate and they seem to get along. They might squabble over some piece of food, but generally they don't hurt each other.
And that's where there's like 30 or 40 of them at a time, isn't there, or something like that?
The only time they might be aggressive towards each other is during mating season. So you'll see a couple of males will what they usually do is lock talons and they'll spiral down, right, until one of them lets go. And sometimes they don't always let go, right? They're not always.
You mean they're locked onto each other?
Oh yeah, they'll grab a hold of each other's feet and they kind of spiral do this spiral down to the ground.
Oh my God! So it's like chicken, but for eagles.
Pretty much, yeah, pretty much. So we've had a few that have come in that they couldn't let go because they were the way their talons hooked, right?
Yeah.
Or they wouldn't let go, right? So they would arrive as a pair, and you got to untangle them. And usually they're okay, but it's you think evolutionary is not a very smart way to behave, right?
Well, I mean, there's guys out there that probably do stupider things.
Yes, yeah. But generally they're okay. But that's about the only time they're really aggressive towards each other is.
Wow, that's crazy. Well, like I said, I mentioned before, when I used to live in Greenfield, there's always eagles down there. And I came home one day, and it seems very odd. Like, I just looked up, and over the river, like way, way up, there was 3 or 4 of them, all kind of just like staying together, going down the river, kind of checking it out.
Could be a family unit too, right? It depends on the time of year you saw them. Like, late spring, early summer, the chicks would have hatched. So it could be a couple of parents with a young one that they're basically teaching how to hunt.
Teaching, right?
Right. So you'll see them together, and usually they'll have 1 to 2 eggs. That's the maximum they'll have.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they don't have a whole lot. Yeah. And most people would know probably that at one time eagles were on the endangered species, right? Because especially in the United States because of DDT, right?
Yeah.
Because their eggs the eggshells to be too thin, so the chicks wouldn't develop and the babies wouldn't live.
Oh, okay.
And a lot of the eagle population in the United States was actually repopulated from eagles from Nova Scotia and Cape Breton.
Oh, wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, but now I don't think they're even on the threatened species anymore. They've made a major comeback, and there's lots of them around. So that's really good to see, right? Because they're top predators, and it's good to have them around.
What would have brought the population of them down in the first place?
Well, it was DDT.
Sorry. Yeah, I wasn't listening.
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah, DDT. So it was basically it was to control weeds on farms, right? So they would spray it all over the place, and they didn't realize that it was affecting the eggshells in birds, primarily peregrine falcons. They were endangered because of it, and eagles, they were endangered because of it. And so the population dropped. It just nosedived during that period when it was being used, before it was understood that chemical was causing this problem.
So everything changed. They took that.
Take it out of the environment and then repopulate where the eagle population had crashed with other ones that were strong and healthy, and the population came back.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow. Jeez. I wonder if this is all going to go in cycles.
Well, let's hope not. I mean, I would like to see, the population remain stable. I think it's doing really well. It'd be nice to see other things that are impacting them, such as lead and collisions and power lines, sort of minimized as best as possible. I mean, they're wild creatures, and they're going to have their own issues and things that happen to them. Some of them are clumsy, some of them fly into things, some of them are not too smart, some of them have a disability when they're hatched, right? They may not be fully they may not be fully functioning in whatever capacity, right? Because that's the way nature is. Things have mutations. But for the most part, the reason we see any wild animal at our center is because of something some human did or did accidentally, right?
Oh, yeah.
So the majority of animals are impacted because of human activity. So it's either habitat loss, right? Somebody cut down the tree or the forest in which they were living, or they put up some structure that used to be part of the migratory route, or they shot them, or they hit them with a car, or they took them out of the chimney because the nest was in there. Any number of reasons, right? So part of our organization's goal is to educate people as to things that they can do to minimize their impact on wildlife. Because, we share the planet with these things. And over the past 100 years, the wild population of the planet has decreased, I think, somewhere on the order of 50%.
Ugh.
According to some studies, right?
Right.
From what I can recall.
Yeah.
That's massive, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's wrong. So the reason I do what I do is to try and help any of these wild animals that are impacted, not because of something nature did, right, which is fine because that's nature, but because of something somebody did.
Yeah, right.
And a lot of it's accidental. And a lot of it's just ignorance. People just don't know. But sometimes it's deliberate. Like we've had birds that have been shot for no good reason, like a bald eagle. You're not allowed to shoot bald eagles. It's a federal crime to shoot bald eagles, but we've had eagles that have been shot.
No.
We've had loons that have been shot.
Really?
Also a crime. Yeah. So ignorance, stupidity, malice. There's a lot of reasons why animals come here because of human activity, and it's frustrating sometimes, but it feels good that we can actually fix them up and put them back in the wild and sort kind of right that wrong in a way, right?
Yep. Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. So you can't shoot a loon either.
Nope.
Really?
They're protected.
Oh, yeah, I guess. Loon's
Yeah, because
they're
I think they're on the threatened species list because of habitat loss, because they live on lakes and they have their chicks on lakes, and they're losing their habitat because people like to have cottages on lakes, and people have cottages on lakes. They like to have sea-doos, and they like to have canoes and kayaks and go fishing with motorized boats. And all that activity is stressful for loons. So when people move in, the loons will move out, and slowly they're losing their places to do that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's just as bad.
Yeah.
Because we're not really going in and disrupting any other birds.
And part of it, too, is accessible shoreline for birds, because they need to get to shoreline in order to create a nest for their young. And once the eggs hatch, then they spend their time on the water. The rest of the time, they are not on land. They only ever land to lay their eggs. And they can't walk on land. So they are primarily aquatic birds. So if you ever see a loon, say on the ground in a parking lot, for example, or on a trail in the woods, definitely pick it up or get somebody who knows what they're doing to rescue it, because it will never take off. They can't stand up on their legs because they're so far back on their bodies.
Oh, wow.
So they need water to take off.
I honestly didn't think they were that big of a difference from a duck.
Yeah, they're definitely different from a duck.
Yeah, it seems
ducks
so.
can at least stand up and take off from land.
Yeah.
A loon can't. And there's a lot of seabirds that are the same way. They can't take off from land because they have evolved to the way their bodies are shaped, that their legs are back far enough in their body that they can't support their own weight on their feet. So some of the seabirds, which you'll never see because they always spend their time on the ocean, in a big storm like the hurricane that's coming, for example,
right,
that will blow them inland because they aren't able to get out of the path of it, or it's just too strong for them to resist. And once they're blown inland and they crash into the trees or they land on a parking lot because the wet parking lot looks like a lake, but it's not, they're stuck. They can't take off. And all they really need is, if they've only been on the ground for a short period of time and they're not broken in any way, all they need to be is taken back to water and released over the
And
ocean.
they should be good
They
to
should
go.
be good, yeah.
Really?
Usually we prefer to have a look at them first. So if if somebody found one on a parking lot, for example, and they're concerned about it, bring it to us and we would take a look at it and say, yeah, it's good to go. Take it to open water and let it go.
Wow.
Yeah. So we'll see like dovekies, which are some people think they're mistaken for penguins, but there's no penguins in North America, right?
Yeah.
They're all South
Right.
Pole birds. Dovekies, they're black and white little birds. They have tiny little feet. There's also murres, common murres. It's a huge variety of seabirds that I can't remember at this moment in time because I'm on camera. That
Yeah, that's how it goes.
that get blown inland quite frequently. Yeah, and there's one I can't quite remember. It's tiny and there's a little bump on its nose, and you pick it up. It smells like oil, but it's not oil. It just has this really strong oily
really?
odor to it. I just can't remember the name of it, but they're very common. You'll see them and they're not very big. They're tiny little things, but the same thing. They can't take off from land, so they have to be picked up and returned to water in order to get.
That's crazy, and that's all it is too.
Yeah.
Just a little water thing.
Yeah. So that's another part of the education thing too, right? So we know that after a major storm that's blowing inland, that we're going to get calls about birds that they think are injured because they're on the ground and they can't take off. And usually when we get a call like that, we'll say, okay, can you describe the bird to us, or take a photograph with your phone and send it to us? And we go, oh yeah, that's a dovekey, or that's this or that. And say, oh, it needs to, it looks okay, doesn't have any wings sticking out, or there's no broken leg.
Yeah.
Take it to a body of water and let it go, because that's where it came from. Yeah.
That's nuts. Now, that kind of reminds me of something. My aunt found. Now, this happened when I was really young, but I think she has a picture of it. Now, she went out to the wood pile one day to get some wood. She was doing a couple trips back and forth, and she found a puffin.
Mm-hmm.
That was...
Is she from Newfoundland?
No, but that thing that's where it was from.
Yeah.
And so she got a hold of somebody because she didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
And apparently that's what it was, but it was all mixed up.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know. It happened a long time ago. I'll try to track the picture down. Maybe I can get it and show you. But
Sure.
But
it's not unheard of. And again, being aquatic birds, they could be out in the ocean someplace when a major storm comes through, and they can get blown offshore a long, long way.
yeah, that's a
by the
long,
weather.
long ways.
It is, but it's happened before.
Yeah.
So it's quite possible it could have been a puffin. Yeah, absolutely.
What's the biggest, one of the biggest birds, or maybe aggressive, or something that was tricky to work with?
The ones that I find the most aggressive to work with are snowy owls. They're like you saw in the nursery when I put the eagle on his back on the scale.
Right.
It was pretty calm.
Yeah,
right?
really
It still
calm,
wasn't
yeah.
happy, but it was calm. Wasn't fighting. Snowy owls, they don't stop fighting. No matter how you're holding them, they're constantly struggling.
Really?
Which is stressful for both us and the bird, right? Because because they're struggling, their adrenaline is up and their heart rate is up, and that's not healthy for them. That's unhealthy because all the toxins are dumped into the body when you're stressed. So the fight or flight instinct, right?
Right.
Because they're constantly fighting, that just keeps going into their body, and it's hard for the kidneys to process, hard for the liver to process. So you want to minimize stress on the animal as much as possible. So handling time, you try to minimize the handling time to as minimal as possible. So you hold on to them, you do what you got to do, then you put them back in their enclosure and let them be so they can de-stress. The eagles are tricky when you're trying to grab them because their instinct is to fly away, and if they can't fly away, then their instinct is to flip towards you and present their talons, and so they'll try and grab a hold of you with their talons. But that's usually the last line of attack for them. So once you have a hold of their talons or feet, you're good. You have control of the bird pretty much.
Yeah, they're pretty much chill right out, eh?
Another bird that's hazardous to work with are cormorants. They're a seabird as well. You'll see them a lot on pilings, like on the way to Pictou, along that causeway. You'll see them all standing on those piles. Yep.
Okay, I think I know what you got.
They're kind of a dark colored bird with orange beaks and orange feet.
Okay,
so they have a really pointy beak, which is very sharp. So that if they grab hold of you or pinch you with the tip, they'll tear a little triangle out of you. Same as an eagle would too, but they're really quick. And the other part about the cormorant is they have a serrated edge to their beak as well. So they're not quite teeth, right? They're not teeth per se, but it has an edge like a saw. It's also very sharp. So if you happen to get grabbed by a cormorant, they're going to, as soon as they bite onto you, they're going to cut your finger. They'll definitely make you bleed because it's so sharp. And no matter how small the bird looks, it's amazing how much bite strength they have. It's even a little starling it can give you a really nice pinch because they're incredibly strong. Their beak.
Really?
Yeah. So I would say snowy owls are the most unpleasant birds to deal with because they're always fighting you, and eagles definitely hazardous to work with. Loons and cormorants because of their beak. Like a loon has a really long pointy beak, and one of their ways of defending themselves is to stab at things with their beak to protect themselves.
Okay.
So you always got to be cognizant that, okay, this guy's got a long reach because he has a long neck. It's longer than it looks. So we will wear a face shield and some heavy clothing and big gloves so that if they do decide to poke at you, they're not going to hurt you.
Yeah, you will always have that face shield on when you're working with anything pretty big.
I try to, yeah. And sometimes I forget, or sometimes we're doing something urgently and I may not have time to grab it, but I try to have it on all the time. It depends. You can read the body language generally of most of the animals.
Yep.
Like usually when they come in, they're really sick and weak, so they don't have a lot of fight in them and don't have a lot of strength.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll gauge quickly and say, yeah, that one's probably not going to do it. So may decide not to wear the face shield because it's sometimes hard to talk in it. It's a little hard to breathe. It fogs up and it's uncomfortable. But if it's a really healthy animal or it's time to release it, I'll always wear it because it just takes one moment of inattention and you've got a chunk out of your nose or you have a poke in your eye.
Or your eye out.
Or your jugular is poked, right?
yeah, jugular. Something bad like that, I guess.
We try to be as safe as possible and be aware of the risks that handling these animals presents. But we're pretty good at reading their body language, and for the most part, if they're sick and injured, they don't have a lot of fight left because by the time they've gotten to the point where somebody was able to pick them up, they're probably 24 to 48 hours away from dying.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they're pretty weak.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
I always used to think eagles were the most aggressive for some reason. Maybe it's just because they're so, growing
That's the way
up.
they're portrayed, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But the owls are pretty...
Well, the snowy owl, like on the other side of it, the barred owl is probably my favorite one to deal with. They're super chill. Like most of the times when it comes time to catch them, they're sitting on their perch, and if you just walk up to them slowly, but not not looking at them directly. If you look at any wild thing directly in the eye, they get really nervous and upset, right? Because it's a threat.
Right.
But if you just kind of casually walk in, not looking at them, you can reach up and grab their feet, and they'll just stay on the perch until you pluck them off, right?
Really?
Yeah. So, and they don't fight a whole lot once you're holding on to them. They're kind of like, okay, do what you got to do. I don't think they enjoy it, but they are not fighting as much as some of the other species do. Great horned owls, those ones I have a lot of respect for, and same as eagles, because even though they're not as big as an eagle, the grip strength in their feet is phenomenal. I think pound for pound, they're as strong as an eagle.
Really?
And if you got one of them grabbing your arm, you're going to be in serious pain. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, so I treat them the same as eagles. I would wear a face shield and the heavy gloves and the heavy clothing just to keep myself protected.
Now, what do they prey on?
They will generally eat rodents. They'll
right?
also go after like snowshoe hare as well. Like that's the biggest they would probably go for. But opportunistic as well. If there's something dead in the woods, and they're hungry, they'll eat it.
Yeah. Did you see that video on YouTube of that owl coming in? There's two doves sitting there, two pigeons or something.
No, I didn't see that.
And there's an owl came in, and he just came in out of nowhere, and they didn't even see him coming. He just snatched one and took it, and the other one turned around and didn't even know. Yeah, it was really good footage too. It was just weird because you could see the eyes in the background just coming up.
Well, that's the cool thing about owls is they're silent, right? They don't make any noise when they fly. So, like an eagle, you'll hear the sound of their feathers going through there.
Really?
But we've been in some of the bigger enclosures, and an owl has flown around you, and you can see him flying, but he's making no sound at all. So if you closed your eyes, you wouldn't know he was flying. Or sometimes you've walked into the enclosure, looking down at the ground because you were going to grab a food bowl or something, and the owl was on this perch here, and you didn't see him when you walked in. You bent down to pick it up, and then when you look up, he's like just flying over your head, and you never heard him, right?
Why is that? Like when
it's
you
the
touch...
way their feathers have evolved. They've evolved for silent flight because that's how they hunt at night, and they're hunting rodents, and rodents are pretty good listeners, so they have to be really, really stealthy. So the way the wind flows through their feathers, basically the feathers have evolved to such that the wind noise is minimized, right?
Wow.
So you imagine two surfaces rubbing against each other like your hands, right?
Yeah.
It makes some sound. So it's the same with anything moving through the air. If it's moving through the air fast enough, the friction between the air and whatever it's going over makes sound. So the feathers on owls have evolved to the point where it allows the air to flow over them in such a way that it makes no noise, no sound. It's incredible.
Oh my God,
It's
that's
fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally fascinating. So when you're in an enclosure with the owls and they fly, it's like they're silent. It's beautiful to watch.
So when you can't obviously have those two birds like eagles and owls in here.
No, we can't mix the species together because they would kill each other or try to kill each other.
Yeah, right.
So one would come out on top. So in the flyway, there's only ever eagles in the flyway.
Yeah.
Because this is the biggest space, and they need a lot of space to learn to fly or to refly. But the other enclosures we have are big enough for us to be able to determine if the bird can fly or not. So they're long enough that they can hop from one perch to the next, and we go, yep, their wings are functioning properly.
Yeah.
They're able to land and perch and eat, so they're good to go. So yeah, we'd never mix them together.
So do you ever have animals here, like an eagle here, and let's say you have something that it preys on, and you have a little bird or something here also? Do they ever get nervous if they hear them squawking? Like you?
I imagine they would. Yeah, probably would. But I don't like. For the most part, they're not close enough for that to be an issue.
Okay.
And I think in the nursery, because there's so much activity with us moving around. Most of the birds
there's
are
all
pretty
kinds of
quiet.
distraction.
Yeah.
Probably. Yeah.
So they're nervous already as it is. But generally, they're far enough apart. If they did hear them, it'd be like in the wild. They would maybe be a heightened awareness or alertness to them, but they probably wouldn't be like scared or terrified like it would be.
Yeah, it's not like you're in the natural setting of
or
the
they
woods.
can see each other, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, part of the design of this building was so that things can't see each other easily.
Yeah. Right.
Right.
Nice. Yeah, this building's very impressive.
Yeah, we were very pleased with how it worked out. We built it, finished it in 2013. There was about 6 or 7 years of planning went into it, along with the fundraising, because it cost a considerable amount of money. So we spent 6 years fundraising for it, and when it finally had enough, we built it, and it's been perfect. It's perfect.
Yeah, so, and you never painted the outside or anything, so it's not like you got to do.
No, minimal
That's another thing
maintenance, right?
you'd love to have on your list of things to do.
Yeah, no, thank you. Well, we knew that it was going to be exposed to the elements, and that the interior would be exposed to the elements.
Yeah.
Right. Because we want the environment in here to be similar to the outside environment.
Right.
Because the birds have to acclimatize, and this is their last stop before they go. So the exterior wall is all pressure treated lumber, so it's well protected, and the interior is underneath the roof, so we don't have to worry about that. And it's surprising how little snow gets into this building in the wintertime. It requires a very fine particulate type of snow and a wind in a certain direction for it to come through the slats.
Yeah, you're right. Yep. So what's on? You got a skylight up in the roof?
Yeah, there's 6 translucent panels, and the rest is all steel roofing. So like the roof is completely covered.
Very good.
Yeah.
So it's like the snow builds up, it slides off at anywhere.
Yeah, pretty
No
much.
problem, no problem.
Yeah.
You have some trees on the inside. I took a couple pictures of this place, so I'll be posting pictures on this too,
Yeah, and there's lots of video on our YouTube channel and on our Facebook page and on our website.
which I'll also have links to.
So people can see the birds flying in here in slow motion and so on. But we put stuff in here because basically as distraction for the birds, right? Because the eagles will get bored, and putting some trees in here gives them a little bit of natural environment. It's not a lot, but it's just a little bit of therapy for them. So that's why there's we'll put in egg cartons and toilet roll tubes, and there's soccer balls in here. So they move stuff around and they'll pick at things, and it just gives them something of interest while they're here, because otherwise they're just sitting on a perch all day.
Yeah, right. So when they get stressed out, do they do stuff like pluck feathers out and stuff like that?
No,
or?
we've never seen that. They usually they'll injure themselves because if they're like say trying to get away from you, and they're panicking because they don't see a way out. They can injure themselves with their talons, right? Because they might grab their own foot or they might grab their own wing and do some damage to it. So, but generally, they're pretty, because they're top predators. They're like, okay, I'm just going to fly away and I'll be happy with that. And they just go away from us, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And that bird that you had up there, anyway, sorry for jumping around a little bit,
Yep.
but I was just trying to think of the pictures. I just realized my computer's over there, and I wanted to bring up a couple pictures to
Right.
show you, but
You can't do it because the computer's right there.
so I'm gonna have to go into my memory banks, which I have
Yep.
2 folders in. That's it. No, but you had that bird up there with the 2 hooks in it.
Yes, that was a cormorant, sorry. Northern gannet. So it's an aquatic bird. It's one of the seabirds we were talking about that can't take off from land, right?
Oh, okay.
Or,
yeah.
if it's blown inland, it needs to be helped because it needs it either needs to jump off a cliff or it needs to be over water in order to fly, right? Because that's how they get their speed up to be able to fly, because they have really short, narrow wings that are designed for really quick flight. And the way the gannets hunt, they're fish eaters. So, but what they do is they're plunge divers, I think they're called, or plunge eaters. Basically, they're flying over the ocean and they'll look down and they'll see a school of fish and they'll pick a fish they want to grab and they'll tuck their wings in and just drop like an arrow. Like they just look like this really thin spike dropping into the water. And as soon as they hit the water, they can basically fly underwater. They're flapping their wings and they're kicking their feet, and they're extremely agile, surprisingly agile underwater. And they'll grab their fish and then they'll head up to the surface and lift up out of the water and go back to where their nest is on the edge of a cliff.
Right.
So they're remarkable birds. But the one you were talking about came into us because it got tangled into some fishing gear. So some discarded fishing line that somebody had used. When it was discovered, it was on a beach up towards I think up towards Tatamagouche up that way, or Pugwash up that direction.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
And it was among the rocks, and somebody spotted it, and it had fishing line tangled around its wing and around its neck and around its feet, so it couldn't move. It was basically immobilized, and if they hadn't done anything to help it, it would have died right there.
Right.
So what they did is they cut all the line they could get off of it, and they called Department of Natural Resources, who came and grabbed it for us and brought it here. And when we took it to the clinic to x-ray it, we noticed that not only did it have a hook in its mouth, but also had a hook in its wing from that fishing line. So we surgically removed both of those from it. And unfortunately, by the time we got it home, it died. Cormorants are really stressful in captivity. They don't handle it very well. And so probably the stress of being tangled in fishing line for who knows how long, the transportation, and then us working on him was probably too much for his body to handle.
Right.
So discarded fishing line is a serious risk to wildlife, especially aquatic birds.
Yeah, actually, I had me and my friend were at my cottage, and this is over in Brule, out of all places, and I was like, you got a fishing line on, or you got your poles on you? Yeah. So we went and got them, and we cast it out, and sure enough, one of them got snagged, and and I was like, well, what about something that walks by? Like, somebody's going to get that in the foot, or a dog's going to get in the foot. So I was like, you can, do whatever. I got to wait till the tide comes out or goes out now before I find it.
Yeah.
So I went back out. It was like 11 o'clock at night with a flashlight, and I eventually found it.
Good.
Yeah. And when it was bad too. There's 3 or 4 hooks in it.
Yeah. We participated in a cleanup Burnt Coat Beach a while back, and while we were doing that, we found several hooks in the mud just from people discarding their fishing line.
Oh, what can you do? I mean, you can be smarter of where you're fishing at, maybe. I don't know. I don't fish a whole lot, and there's probably a lot of people that argue on that, but...
or at least do your very best to try and recover it if you can.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
It's not going away.
See, I knew the water was going to be gone at one point, so all I had to do was stick around for a little bit, but, some people will be
some people
harder
don't
to
care,
do.
Right? Or just don't, or aren't able to make the next leap that if I leave that there, it's going to impact something else, like a loon or a cormorant or a seagull or any other number of wildlife that's going to be in that area when they leave.
Yeah, some people, it's just hard for some people to get it through their heads. I guess you got to kind of think of it too, like you would want a kid coming along and getting that through a foot and getting a lawsuit because parents are suing you. I think
if they know it was you, right?
It
could hurt somebody as well, or somebody's kid, or your kid, or it could hurt you when you go back to that beach sometime. You never know.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So if you can, definitely try and retrieve it if possible, for sure.
So you also do other animals here too, right?
Yes.
Like you had a fox in here that I seen a really cool x-rays of.
Yes.
I'm going to post those too.
Sure.
So
we primarily do birds. So we specialize in birds of prey. But we also do small mammals up to the size of a fox, except for raccoons. We don't do raccoons, mainly because of the zoonotic diseases that you can get from them, and we don't have the space to look after them. So we'll do squirrels and chipmunks and foxes as well. The one you saw was hit by a car in Cape Breton, and the person who accidentally hit it drove it from Cape Breton through the night to get here so that we could look after it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they were really upset that they had hit this fox. Yeah.
Did it make it?
Yes, it did. It was actually a young fox. It was just a kit, they call it. So basically, same as a puppy is to a dog.
Yep.
And it had a fracture in one of its bones in its front paw. And so we kept it long enough for the bone to heal. And then the person who hit it came back and picked him up and took him back to the spot because he knew where the den was.
Right.
Because the parent was still with the other ones.
Oh,
He
okay.
returned it to him. Yeah, which is pretty cool.
Just drove through right through the night.
Yep. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, they were that upset. Yeah.
I'd probably do the same thing. I'd
Yeah.
feel so bad.
Yeah.
I'd be-
So that was really kind of them to do that. So yeah, that was a beautiful animal. Yeah. So foxes. We also do reptiles. So we've had turtles and snakes. As
Oh,
well.
really?
Yep.
Oh, cool. I didn't know that.
Yep. We've had there's 4 species of turtle in Nova Scotia. There's snapping turtles, Blandings turtles, wood turtles, and painted turtles. I think Blandings and painted are endangered in Nova Scotia. And we recently had a Blandings turtle that came from the Kedzie Park area. That it was a 40-year-old turtle, and they knew it was 40 years old because there's a research group down there that studies the turtles and monitoring them because they're endangered. And this was a turtle that was trapped 20 years ago, and when they're first doing their study, and they knew it was 20 years old at that point. And at that point, it already missing its 2 back feet. Some predator had chewed off the back feet of this turtle. So it was a breeding female. They don't start breeding until they're 20 years old. So it's very important to keep this turtle alive if you can. Anyway, when they called us, this turtle's now, this is 20 years later, this turtle had been attacked by some predator that chewed off one of its front feet. So it's down to basically one good foot and 3 not so good ones. So
Nobody's going to want to mate with them now.
Well, no, I don't think they're so picky. But it was a breeding female. We x-rayed her, and there was eggs inside her. This is because it's the spring, right?
Oh, okay.
So before we did the surgery, we induced her to lay the eggs, and the eggs were transported back to the group that are monitoring them so that they could be hatched, right? Because because they're endangered, it's very important that any egg from any of these species is kept alive as possible. And once we knew that the eggs were safe, then we knew the turtle was strong enough to go through surgery, and we did surgery to but just to basically clean up the amputation from that wound because it was a dead bone sticking out and it was kind of infected and gross.
Right.
So we fixed that up. It healed beautifully. We tested her in some swim tanks to see how well she could adapt to just only having one good working foot. She had no problem moving around in that tank. So she returned to the location where she was found, and they monitored her for a couple of days to make sure she was okay in the wild. She did great. So it's a success story. But yeah, we do turtles, snakes, small mammals.
Out of the 4 different turtles, you mentioned 4 of them?
Yeah, 4 different species.
Which one's big?
The snapping turtles are the bigger ones. Yeah.
How big can they get?
They can get to be huge. They can be, I don't know, I guess this big and shell around. Like they can be huge.
So did you hear that, Matt? I was telling them a story about a turtle that I found on Black Rock Road or Valley Road, I guess it's called, and it was coming out of the bushes, and it was on the side of the road as a car went by it and avoided it. They thought it was a rock, and by the time I got to it, it was more in the middle of the road. Yeah. And I just stopped the car and I got out. I didn't have a camera or nothing on me, and I only lived a minute up the road. I probably could have made it, go get it, and then I was like, should I try to grab this thing? And I was like, nope, don't do that. And then I just watched it go off into the bushes, and it was actually clearing trees out of the way.
They're big animals. And they could easily bite your finger off if you get in front of them, if you're that close to them. So if you what we recommend with turtles, if you see them crossing the road and it's a dangerous road but it's safe for you to stop the car and get out, to pick the turtle up by the back of the shell, so the back 3/4, so they can't get their head around.
Yeah,
right?
Okay.
And you're able to lift it because they can be quite heavy. Or you just be patient enough and wait until they've gotten off the road themselves. But if they're in danger and you can help them off the road, just help them off in the direction they're going. So lift them and move them off to the side of the road if you can. Snapping turtles are very dangerous in that regard, so you got to be careful with them. The rest of them are not so bad. They'll still give you a nasty bite, but they're not as big, so you can pick them up relatively easily. But a snapping turtle, I have slow motion video of the turtle when I was holding him. We had one here, and his head came back to the middle of the shell. That's how far back they can reach.
Holy jeez, really?
So you don't want to be any further than the back quarter of the shell when you're picking them up.
Yeah. That'd be terrible to get a bite from one of those.
It's pretty scary. Oh yeah, they're very scary creatures. So, but yeah, you can help them out by encouraging them to get off the road.
Come on.
Yeah, move along. Yeah.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. How long are we in it now?
Sorry, what's that?
How long are we into it now? Did you happen to take a look? I didn't look.
Oh, I think we're into about an hour now. Yeah.
About an hour. I'll check on the computer.
Yeah. Just that we were planning to take an animal to the clinic, so.
I don't want to take up too much of your time.
Not sure if you got enough stuff yet or not.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we're good.
So you want to do a quick conclusion?
Yeah. All right. Well.
You still recording?
Yeah, it's still going.
Okay.
The video's still here. I'll just turn the video back on to make sure.
There we go.
Right on.
All
So
right.
out of all this, what can you encourage people to do?
Well, try to be friendly towards wildlife. Educate yourselves on things that people do that impacts wildlife. So ways you can do, things that are good for wildlife in terms of, making livable habitat for birds in your yard if you want, or recognizing when wildlife is in danger, say like a turtle on the road or an eagle that's eating on something on the side of the road. Be careful not to hit it. Stuff like that. Check out our website, check out our Facebook page. I will say that the Cobequid Wildlife Rehabilitation Centre is a nonprofit charity, so we're funded through donations and through fundraising. We don't get any money from the government, so anything that you can give to us is greatly appreciated. It's extremely expensive to do what we do. The average bald eagle eats about $10 worth of food a day.
Oh, geez, really?
Easily. We have 12 eagles in care right now, so it's easily $120 a day just in food. So anything helps.
Yeah,
we greatly appreciate it.
And I'll be posting all the links too for the donation. I have them all ready to go in a file. All I have to do is add them, and I think it'd be really important maybe for people to go to that website and donate a couple bucks if you can, or just get a hold of these people. And you got to see this place, though. It's really great. They're doing really, really good things here, and there's a lot of animals getting better as we speak. So
yeah, I'll also add too that because we're dealing with wild animals and minimizing the stress on them, that we're not open to the public, so we don't do tours and we don't generally have.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Right?
But the website, you can check it out.
You can check it out. So that's why we post so much video and photographs of the work we do, so that people can get a feel for it as well, and also through like this podcast, it's a good way for people to understand.
Well, I appreciate you having me. I mean, you're very, very busy. I had no idea how busy Murdo was until I got out here.
Yeah, we're off to the clinic after this to do some surgical work on an eagle. So.
Right on. Well, maybe we can get together sometime. Like, I wanted to talk about some of your photography.
Sure, we
and
can do
everything.
that for another podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So maybe I'll get here a little quicker next time, or not take a long way around.
Place for that one.
Yeah, great. If you got a minute,
sure.
Maybe pop a couple beers or something, talk about some of your photos.
Why not? Let's do that.
Awesome.
All right, thanks, Gary.
Thanks, Murdo.
Take care.
All right, there we go. Thanks for listening. Thanks, Murdo, for taking me on a little tour. Thank you for everybody that's working at the Cobequid Wildlife Rehabilitation Centre. You're doing a great job. Keep up the good work. I'll be posting links in the description of this podcast where you can donate videos you can see on YouTube of them releasing birds into the wild. Just a couple different things. Just check out their website. Check them out on Facebook. And so that was fun, and it was an eye-opener. My next guest is going to be John Rogers from Motivational Man Mondays. Another tongue twister for me. I can't seem to get over my speech impediment. I didn't even know I had a speech impediment until I listened to myself. So I'm growing as a person. I guess I'll get better. Anyway, thanks again for listening, and tune in soon. Enjoy your time.
People count the road to find themselves in heaven, in the place that I call home.